Hey everyone, as per usual, the political spinsters, the narrative creators, the opinion makers, those in the established media, they're desperate and they're constantly trying to rewrite history so that they can negate and completely deny any of the responsibility of those on their ideological side of the political spectrum, any responsibility for some of the nasty, violent, and authoritarian measures that were implemented throughout the 20th century. I mean, we've seen out there, I mean, you must know at this point in time, whether it's, like I say, I mean, look at Mao, look at Stalin, look at Lenin. These are people that, like, every one of them would identify as left. I mean, come on, socialism, communism. This is leftist stuff. Just go look up what a right-winger, what they're saying when they talk about right-wingers is they're trying to suggest or correlate that right-winger terminology with conservatives, people on the right side of the political spectrum. Conservatives. Hello, right-wing means conservatives, left-wing means collectivists. So to pretend that there's right-wing collectivists, okay, you might try to present that they're maybe a little bit to the right of their left-wing socialist or communist counterparts, but they all still function within that same ideological spectrum of collectivism, of forced subjugation, of sacrificing the individual for the greater good, for the collective. Every one of these folks, like I say, whether it's those in the Russian Revolution, right, Stalin and Lenin, or Mao, the Great Leap Forward, Maoist China, or in this particular example, Mussolini, Benito Mussolini. They've tried to constantly talk about those in the establishment, the political, the pundit class on the left, the collectivists. Not only do they try to ignore all the tragedies and historical precedent of death, destruction, starvation, and devastation that was a result of trying to implement communism, that particular brand of socialism, but even in countries such as Italy with Benito Mussolini at the helm, in the early 20th century, or his counterpart from Germany, Adolf Hitler. Once again, they tried to paint Adolf Hitler as a right-winger, but once again, I mean, if you just take even the slightest amount of time out of your day and just Google these things, right? Just look through some historical documentation or information or literature regarding these two people, these two ideologues, you'll find out that not only was Hitler, I mean, think about it, Hitler rose to power under the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party, that was just short form, that's just a short term for National Socialist Germans Workers' Party. And Benito Mussolini, once again, I mean, the man was a staunch socialist his whole life. His father was a very dominant player in the socialist movements prior to that. So these are socialists. These are collectivists. Just because they might not want to do their particular brand of socialism, what it is the big thing really what it is some people had this global communism or global socialism, right? So they're trying to bring that to the masses, in the whole world. And then there was more nationalist movements, but they were still very much all about collectivism, sacrificing the individual for the greater good, right? These were all collective ideologues. Every single one of them. None of these ventures, none of these ideologies had any respect for the individual. And all ideologies that are of the collectivist bent are predominantly promoted by the left side of the political spectrum, those who identify on the left side of the political spectrum, those who will rail against the rich. Well, who the fuck is railing? Who's on the right wingers? Who are the right wingers that rail against the rich? Like, come on, that's not anything about fucking right wing politics. That's leftism. That's collectivism. Anyways, this is all in reference to, like I say, the CBC News article with a headline: Mussolini's hometown aims to deter far-right supporters with Museum of Fascism. Prodapio hopes to attract a different kind of visitor with a museum that shows dark period for what it was. This is being presented by Megan Williams, May 6, 2018. The road to hell may be paved with good intentions, but as a tiny town in northern Italy has discovered, so too can the road to neo-fascism. 2 decades ago, the former mayor of Prodapia birthplace of Benito Mussolini, decided to allow the sale of fascist and Nazi trinkets in small shops in town. The idea was to control their sale by limiting them to a handful of stores on the sleepy town's main street. Mussolini admirers leave the object's miniature busts, t-shirts, and framed photos on the grave of the fascist dictator who in 1922 ushered Italians into their darkest period. That chapter lasted until 1943, when Mussolini was arrested and 2 years later executed. It was our downfall, says current mayor of Predoppio, Giorgio Frescinetti, of the trinket decision. The biggest mistake this town has ever made. Instead of keeping the expressions of extremist sympathies under wrap, the three shops proved to be magnets for far-right supporters who began organizing marches in town on the anniversary of Mussolini's rise to power, known as the March on Rome, as well as his birth and death. These visitors posted videos on YouTube enticing even more fascist supporters to flock to Predoppio. We're treated like we're the Chernobyl of Italy, like we're contaminated, says Frasinetti, a member of the center-left Democratic Party. Now the town is hoping a long-abandoned fascist center can provide salvation. Standing outside the towering curved edifice that, when built in 1937, was called the House of Fascism and Hospitality, Frasinetti explains his plan to foil efforts to make the town a fascist pilgrimage site by transforming the building into Italy's first museum of fascism. The monument would not be to celebrate the political regime that murdered thousands and cooperated in the deportation of Italy's Jews to death camps, but to educate Italians about radical authoritarian nationalism at a moment when many fear it's on the rise again. But once again, I mean, think about the kind of people even today, think about the kind of people, that are against Jews or capitalism. Think about it. These are people that are on the left side of the political spectrum, on the ideological spectrum. These are people that are collectivists. These are socialists, communists, right? These are the people that hate, the bourgeoisie. These are the people that hate the Jewish people. These are the people that hate the money makers, right? It's always people on the left side of the spectrum. That even, like I say, even today and in historical aspects in historical areas, it's always been people on the left that hate the money makers, the money exchangers, the money handlers, right? Come on. Just be realistic here, folks. National elections held on March 4th were inconclusive, and negotiations among parties have so far failed to produce a new government. But the far-right anti-immigration La Liga, the League party, emerges as the powerhouse among the right-wing parties, securing almost 18% of votes and outstripping former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia party. Since then, support for La Liga has risen to 23%, and elections in the northern Italian region confirm the party's base is only growing. Once again, just because there are people, this is the fucking problem I've seen, especially with these ideologues, these political pundits, is if you're against anti-immigration, like if you're against migration or mass immigration, then they paint you as being a right-winger. But why would that be the case? Why isn't the working class, right, which is a representation of the leftist ideologues, the leftists, the collectivists, they're the ones that represent the labor, the working class, and it's the laborers, it's the working class that are the ones that are suffering at the hands of this mass immigration, because it's their wages that are being suppressed and declined as a result of having to race down to compete with these migrants, with these economic migrants. So once again, right-wingers? Fuck, right-wingers? Actually, right-wingers, here's the thing I want to point out right now. Right-wingers, like the business type, right? The owners, the capitalists, they love cheap fucking labor. So they don't got nothing against the immigration. Even in Canada, you're not seeing the right-wingers in Canada, although we don't really have genuine right-wingers, but I guess center-right a little bit. But even the Conservative Party in Canada, the Progressive Conservatives, they're not railing against it. They might do a little bit of talking points once in a while to kind of make it sound like it, throw a little meat to their base as far as like, yeah, we're still a white nation kind of thing. But other than that, they love it. The business class, the corporate class in Canada, and I'm sure, in all of Europe and in the US, we're seeing they don't mind dirt cheap labor. They actually love it. Meanwhile, the town of Pradapio has been wrestling with the question of what should become of the former House of Fascism, says Carlo Gunci, cultural consultant on the museum initiative. It's both a space and a symbol, so we realized it made sense to use it to trigger an international debate on memory. Inside, broken windows, dead pigeons, and fallen flagpoles do little to diminish the beauty of the sleek, oversized brick and marble architecture. Wide corridors and soaring staircases lead visitors through rooms that once served as a restaurant, hotel, party room, and propaganda center, all part of Mussolini's effort to turn the town into a fascist showcase. Once again, the propaganda outlets. Look out there today. Are the right-winger media outlets dominating the airwaves or the space on cable or even on the internet? No. It's all these left-wingers. The establishment media represents left-wing collective ideology. So once again, even the media class, that's never a space that's dominated by people that are genuinely right-wingers. Right-wingers are all about limiting government, not growing it, right? So it's like, once again, being morally or logically consistent obviously is something that these CBC contributors, they don't care about. They just want to give you political narratives and hope that you'll just suck it up, hook, line, and sinker, and walk away and thinking that they've been honest with you in any way, in any shape or form, which I'm here to tell you, no, they're not. This is political propaganda, folks, and I'm trying to, clear that fog as best I can. On the top floor down the hall from a light-filled ballroom where black shirts once waltzed is a signature tower. Every fascist era center like this one had one, Gunci explains. They had no practical use, but were really just a symbol of masculine power. I mean, what does masculine power mean, right? I mean, like I say, Stalin, Mao, Lenin, they were very masculine men, and they were all about power, but right-wingers? No, even the leftist ideologues won't touch that third rail. They won't even attempt to try to create that kind of political spin, that kind of political narrative, because they know that you're definitely not going to try winning that argument, because anyone out there would accept that, communism under the Russian Revolution or under the Chinese Revolution, that was all leftist ideologues, right? Gunci explains the rooms will be transformed into a spiraling exhibit modeling on Dante's Circle of Hell to educate visitors about the loss of rights and thousands of lives under fascism, though the organizers still need to raise $8 million if it is to open by 2019. Our plan is similar to what Germans have done with their Nazi past, he says. Instead of destroying buildings that represented their Nazi past, they kept them and used them to challenge those symbols and that past by setting up places of memory right there. Patricia Fabron, a teacher and the head of the Library of Resistance in the town San Sepolcro, the site of fascist concentration camps that imprisoned Yugoslavians during World War II, says Italy has never fully grappled with its fascist past. The memories of this dark time are fragmented and often lost among young people today, she says. She cites the 2017 incident in which Lazio's soccer team fans left stickers featuring Anne Frank wearing the opposing team's colors to insult them. It's an example of something that could only happen in a country that has never fully grappled with its active collusion in the Holocaust. We have to respond to this kind of forgetting by not just merely commemorating anniversaries of events as we do now, but by actively building a collective memory. So once again, like I say, it's all these people, like, they're just trying to rewrite history, folks. Like, look at the way, listen to the way they even talk. or look at the way they even talk or write. Collective memory. Like I say, these are collectivists. These are ideologues on the left side of the political spectrum, but they're just trying to rewrite history so that they can point to their political opponents or people that they have disdain for and make them out to be the culprits so that they can come along and pretend that they're your benevolent saviors or overlords, right? Like I say, these people are a little bit wiser than the right-wing counterparts as far as putting forth political narratives and dialogue, which is why they were so successful during the 20th century, because it was the political and the ruling class in conjunction, in combination with the pundit and propagandist class, the opinion makers, that allowed all this to happen, because they tricked the people's minds. And they're doing the same thing today, and they're seemingly getting away with it for the most part, with the very few exceptions of people like me that are pushing back and trying to shine some light in those dark corners, in those dark recesses of people's minds that have been propagated and promulgated with such political bullshit ideology and political mysticism and political lies. But many historians and members of Italy's Jewish communities have expressed great hesitation, if not opposition, to a museum of fascism, arguing it risks committing the same mistake of good intentions that allowing the small stores to hawk fascist and Nazi paraphernalia did and fuel far-right support. Renowned historian Carlo Ginzburg, whose resistance member father was tortured to death by the Nazis, expressed concern that a museum in Predoppio would further conflate fascism with Mussolini, and in doing so, let off the hook the millions of Italians who actively supported the regime. The historical references need to be clear and unequivocal, he wrote, about the proposition. Also because it would mean Italy has a national museum of fascism without a national museum of resistance. But for Mayor Frazinetti, the completion of the museum cannot come soon enough. We're tired, he says, tired of seeing people who have nothing to do with our town who show up to parade here. Yet despite the fatigue of attracting a movement it wants nothing to do with, Frazinetti and townspeople are working hard to define funding and finish museum plans in hopes of attracting a new kind of pilgrim. School groups, history buffs, and those who want to learn more about this dark period in Italian history, not to support it, but to better resist it. Because once people visit a museum that tells the whole story of fascism, he says, they won't be so inclined to buy a bust of Mussolini down the street. Anyways, I'll post a link to this article in the description of the video below. But once again, I'm just here doing my thing, folks, because I see this kind of political dialogue, this kind of political narrative, and I recognize instinctively that, hey, this is a complete misrepresentation. This is a rewriting of historical norms, of historical precedent, of what these fascists truly represented. Like I said, whether it's Mussolini from Italy or whether it's Hitler in Germany, these were national socialists. Yes, they were more nationalists, right? More closed off as far as being all about their particular country. But they were very much collectivists. They were all about sacrificing the individuals for the greater good, or railing against the capitalists or the bourgeoisie or the wealthy types, and all about promoting the workers to rail up against the rich. That's what this whole movement, that's what all of these fascist movements were about, was promoting the workers class, the National Socialist workers, like in Germany, or in like I say, the People's Movement in Italy. It was completely left-leaning. That was all driven by left-leaning ideologues. The only difference is they might not have agreed in particular with some of their left-leaning ideologues, whether it was, like I say, whether it's Stalin or Lenin in Russia, or whether like it's those under Maoist China, or some of the other leftist ideologues. Leftists can argue and bicker amongst each other and try to create their own particular collective utopia, right? It doesn't have to be, like I say, collectivism is the overarching umbrella, is the overarching ideology. There can be tweaks to their particular narrative to suit the particular leader or the political movement of the day. But none of these people could be considered a genuine right-winger or a conservative. Hello? Just look up the definition. Like I say, we live in the age of information. Just look up the definition of these words, or do a quick wiki search. Just do a Google search, and you'll find out that what I'm telling you is 100% truth. And then once you start down that road, once you start down that rabbit hole, you'll be like, holy shit. You'll be like me. You'll be like a lot of us out here. Be like, oh my God, I have been lied to for basically the entirety of my adult life. It's about time maybe I start getting on board, start getting caught up, getting up to date to reality, to facts. Because, yeah, and I'll admit right now, if you keep propagating this bullshit narrative, then, yeah, history will repeat itself if you don't start to correct some of your current faux pas and mistakes as far as the kind of ideology or representation of particular ideologies that you're having jammed in your head. It's up to you. The onus is on you to do better. The future of the Western world relies on it. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.